I don't know why it's going to keep happening, but we'll just live with it today. If you happen to get, oh, everybody have this scanned already? Did you get a book? Did anybody not grab a book? This book is yours to keep. It's my gift to you. If you decide at the end of the semester you don't want it, you can give it back, but you can also keep it. You're welcome. I find it to be useful every once in a while to read and also to pass around to other people. All right. We have a lot of material. I'm trying to figure out because when they changed the schedule for the adjustments at the beginning of the semester, we lost 3 days of class, which may not seem like a big deal, but I was planning on using all of those days of class. So I may go a little faster in these first few classes till I feel like we're going to be in a good pace, but stop me or slow me down if you're not able to relate the things that I'm saying to things that you're going to take away, because the whole point of being here is that you get something out of the class. I'm going to try. It could be that when you hear this online, you won't be able to hear me very well. So that's part of what I'm going to try. Right now I have a little earpiece that allows me to walk around and talk, and it's supposed to connect here with the Bluetooth for my voice. But I'm not sure how clear it's going to be. We'll just have to see. All right, so every day, normally I'm going to have a quote of the day. It's meant to kind of foreshadow what a good part of the discussion is going to be about. This here is kind of wordy. It's written by a guy who won the Nobel Prize back in 1978, Herbert Alexander Simon. But more importantly, in 1975, he won the Turing Award, which is like the Nobel Prize for computer science. So this is someone that's notable in our field. He said, decision makers can satisfice either by finding optimum solutions for a simplified world or by finding satisfactory solutions for a more realistic world. Neither approach in general dominates the other, and both have continued to coexist. Can anybody attempt to translate that into Spanish or English from the language that it's written in? What does that mean? Finding optimum solutions for a simplified world, or finding satisfactory solutions for a more realistic world.
There's no ideal way to decide something.
There's no ideal way to decide something. Just for the benefit of others in the class, we may, So in this class, we're going to get to it then, or we'll do it next class, to modeling. Modeling, I mentioned last class, is a way for computer scientists to take a complex system and reduce it into building blocks and interconnections so that they can implement the model and not worry about the complex system. So which of these two alternatives does modeling sound? Is it finding optimum solutions for a simplified world, or is it finding satisfactory solutions for a more realistic world? Excuse me? Satisfactory solutions for a realistic world, or solutions for a simplified world? In some ways, it's both. But what the modeling is actually doing is it's allowing you to simplify the world. To say, I'm not going to worry about the complexities of the world. I'm just going to worry about the parts of the world that I need to worry about in order to build a model that describes the functions that I'm trying to implement or understand in my software. So think about modeling. Sometimes when I teach this concept to students, there's a, why do I want to know about modeling? I don't like modeling. I just want to read code. Modeling makes writing code fun because it lets you, it gives you the confidence that if you've done the model correctly, when you implement all the pieces of the code, it's going to give you the result that you actually want. You're not going to have forgotten something important, or maybe there's something constant that should have been variable, or hardwired some instructions in that should have function. When you do it, and we'll see an example here in this class and next class of a robotic system where they have some models and they've gone and done some implementations, and you can see what that looks like. So one of the things that you're going to do in your first homework assignment, one of the 3 questions is going to be related to modeling. Last week I had, when you look through the slides that are up online now in Moodle, everybody should have access to Moodle. The bottom 2 were listed there. The bottom one really is not going to be part of any sort of near-term homework or anything, but it more so provides you with perspective as to, like, when we get through this class, you're going to be able to look at the kinds of things that are discussed in that paper and think about them in computer science and computer architecture terms. And so to me, it's kind of cool to read that and think, well, what does this have to do anything with computers or computer science? Because when you read it towards the end of the course, you'll have a better understanding of, hey, wait a minute, this is something actually I could deal with and do some things in programming. But these other 2 on top are more important now. And they're kind of thick. I don't know how you say that in Spanish. Basically, como? Denso? Denso. They're definitely denser. Like when you read it, I would expect that the first time you read it, it's going to be like, okay, I got to read this again. I got to pull this page out and kind of read this while I'm looking at that page. And that's okay. But I will tell you it's extremely worth it to do that, in particular for the top resource. And not just because I wrote it, but because it provides the background for a lot of what you're going to reference throughout the course. And that's why I wrote it. I actually wrote it for you guys. It's not published. The second one is related to modeling. And both of these are related to your first homework. So if you can get through all 3, that's fantastic. If not, I would suggest you get to them in that order, especially because the homework's going to be due on Wednesday and at noontime, which means there's 2 office hours before that. One's Tuesday morning. The other one's Wednesday morning, which you probably don't want to be leaving until Wednesday morning. If you're asking me questions related to this article on Wednesday morning, it's probably not going to help you with your homework. So there won't be enough time. But remember, we have office hours every day on Piazza, meaning that anytime you're reading an article, you're studying something, you want to talk about the homework, just put it up there, and that's a community of all of us where we can talk about things. That's our agenda for today. Last week I had wanted to talk about the human systems interconnection model, which is what that article that you're going to read talks about. But we didn't get to it. And then we're going to go to talking about artificial intelligence, what it means to have an artificial intelligence system that's an artificial generally intelligent system or general intelligence, modeling decision-making, and we won't get through all that today. Okay. Over the next several weeks, we are going to, after we get through this class and the next class, we're going to start talking about computer systems, artificial systems, in parallel as we talk about human systems. For the first few weeks, we're going to be focused on the physiology of the human system, not the psychology of the human system. So the physiology of your system are things like your ears, your eyes, your fingers, your tongue, your nose. And while we're talking about those things in parallel, meaning at the same time in the same class, when we're talking about the nose, we're going to talk about artificial noses, electronic. When we talk about touch, we're going to be talking about things like pressure sensors. When we talk about your eyes, we're going to be talking about things like cameras, digital cameras. After that, we're going to shift, and now we're going to talk about, okay, now we've got all these signals coming in, how do we make sense of it? So that's when we're going to get into higher level systems, computing systems like memories, processors, artificial intelligence structures, and things like that. At the same time, we're talking about concepts like perception that are related to higher level processes in your mind that are combining different sources of information. So I want to give you sort of a vision as we go through that. If you get lost at some point, because all of us do, and you start thinking about why we're talking about cochleas, you'll remember it's because we want to understand how the human brain brings in sound signals, and then we're going to be talking about vibrational sensors or acoustic sensors, which are how digital systems like your phone and computers bring in those very same types of information. So we can think about the human. When we talk about the human, we talk about psychology and physiology. And when we talk about the not human, we talk about computer science and engineering. I struggle with this, but you have a whole article that I wrote over the Christmas holidays for you. And so when you read that article, and after having been introduced into this class, when you ask questions on Piazza, when you decide if you want to come to the office hours, which are in the Rectoria. My office is actually in the Rectoria, which is the Jose de Diego top building. When you do the homework, by the time we get through that process, the reason we're going to do all that is because I think by the time you get through that process, you'll understand this fairly well. This comes from the OSI model in computer science, which is a computer networking model, which is the class, if you were here before this, that was just being taught by the professor next. In computer networking, there's a model called the OSI model, which is the Open Systems Interconnection model. And it is a layered model that talks about different layers of software. And some of that software is the software that you interact with. Think of like the browser software. And some of that software is really embedded software and or hardware circuits that are doing signal processing. And that's what's dealing with taking that information, that email or that chat message that you sent, and turning it into encoded signals that go into an amplifier at a certain mega or gigahertz and cause electromagnetic radiation to go from your phone or your computer by Wi-Fi to something else. So there's a process of the things that most of us think about, like the browser interface and things like that. We don't really have to worry about if the other people who wrote their software did their job right. We don't have to worry about whether it's going to make it out of the Wi-Fi and whether or not the router on the other side is going to be able to get that signal, send it to a server, whether that server is going to be able to unencapsulate the packets that are in there, pull all that information out, and in about that much time, show the person you're chatting with the message that you put in here. And if you want to create an app, you don't have to worry about all those underlying layers for the most part, because you're just going to assume that that software and that hardware is going to do what it needs to interface with Wi-Fi, to interface with the cellular modem, to interface with the internet and all those types of things. Interestingly, we as humans do the same thing. When I want to share a thought with you, I don't have to worry about how the sound is going to come out through my throat and vibrate like, what's that thing called at the back? It vibrates. Amygdala? That's a what is it? I think that's it. Yeah. And I don't have to worry about how my lips are going to move and my mouth is going to move to make the sounds that combine with all the phonetics to get every single word out. I actually rarely think about that. If I did, there's no way I could have possibly have said all the words that I just said, all the sentence structure that I just said. I just pretty much focus on what I want to say, and it just comes out. So same like a computer. So what we've done is say, okay, you know what? That layered model in computer networking is pretty useful if you think about it, because the top layers are the ones that app developers get to worry about and people writing software for computers do. Those bottom layers are things that other people get to worry about that care about, generating and collecting electromagnetic radiation or acoustical sound waves and things like that. And there's some sort of middle layer in all my computers that work with APIs, drivers, for operating systems that basically cause a glue between my application and those underlying physical layer interfaces that interface with the outside world. Computer science, if you take an operating systems, you know that that's effectively the glue between the applications and the communications in the outside world. Well, in our case, it's the same thing. In order for the sound to be generated by my voice so quickly and actually cause words that you actually understand, I can't do that in my consciousness because it would be too slow. If I had to think about causing all these things to happen, it would be too slow. The fact that they're starting to happen means that there are some processes in my brain that I have trained as I've learned words and I've learned to speak since I was a little kid that are going to work really, really fast. Okay? That's that middle stuff. That's the operating system. Those are the drivers that effectively translate my consciousness, the application in my computer program, to my voice, the physical layer Wi-Fi that's going to send the signal and information out. It's a lot of information. Anybody want to talk about any of that? Does it make sense? Yes? Okay, good. So now look at this, because there's a lot of information, but I'm going to divide it up into 3 layers first. These layers are numbered, and they have words next to them. If you look at the blue stuff, those are like, those combine the layers. So the host layers are the top 2, 6 and 7. The mini module layers are the middle cool stuff, layers 5 and 4. And the media layers are layers 3, layer 2, and layer 1. In computer science, in the OSI model for computer networking, the bottom and the top layers have the same name. So the media layers are the ones that worry about getting the packets of information into electrical form so they can modulate the amplifiers that then encode the message and actually transmit it to the air. And here, we have layers that work on all sorts of phenomena. I can also modulate electromagnetic information. Sometimes I can generate electromagnetic signals. If I have static in a dark room, I can actually cause light to occur. So if you think about it, I can make acoustic waves. So in my computer, it has a speaker. It makes acoustic waves. I can make smells. I don't know if I can make any really good smells. Like human beings can make smells, and they can smell. Right? So that's the media layers. When we get into it, we'll need to break down a little bit more than those 3 layers. But if you take away anything right now, just focus on those aggregations. There's the stuff that is you, that you think I am me, my name, right? I have awareness that I'm in here, that I'm sitting in a room. That awareness is stuff that's going on here. You have that awareness because you can interact with your room. And that interaction with the room always comes in here. There's nothing from the outside real world that you get to be aware of unless it goes through every single one of these layers. That to me can be a little bit discomforting, actually. We talked about the host layers last time. We talked about, as I was introducing things, the simulated reality that your mind creates, and that's really what your consciousness gets to look at. What that suggests to me is if all of my conscious thoughts and my awareness come from this simulated reality and I want to impact the real world, then I need to work hard to make sure that the simulated reality is representative of the real world as much as I possibly can. For better or for worse, I am stuck with the sensors that my humanity gave me. I can only see electromagnetic radiation between around 400 nanometers and around 740 nanometers, meaning electromagnetic radiation that my mind processes as red all the way through violet. If I'm a dog, I can actually see different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum than a human being can. If I'm a spider, I've got all sorts of eyes all over my body and I can see all sorts of other things. What humans can do, because we don't have these natural things, is we can create artificial systems so that if we want to take advantage of things that are happening in wavelengths of light that I can't see or detect, I can make electronic devices that can see or detect that and then use that somehow to make decisions. Those are the layers that interact with reality. And these are these suspended layers that I've mentioned before, and I'm going to keep mentioning throughout the class, that are you. In the sense that most of what you do every single day, when you're sleeping, when you wake up, when you're brushing your teeth, when you're deciding if you're going to run the class or take a scooter, most of those decisions are actually being driven by this part of you. And if you want to actually have a say in what you does, you need to let this thing do its thing, realize it's doing its thing, and let your consciousness evaluate all these suggestions that are coming from the automatic you. And then decide. I will suggest to you that your consciousness is slow. if you react like this to something, the part of you that's doing it is the part that you trained to do it. It's not your consciousness. It can be good in certain situations because there's not a lot of time to think, and you need to let that automatic part of you do things. It can be bad in other situations. And you let that other part of you do something, and then later you're like, I can't believe I did that. So appreciating that this part is powerful, respecting it, and looking at ways of trying to understand what it's doing and mitigating it when you need to is really important. This is an example to help you understand how powerful this is. Has anybody ever seen this? Okay. So what you want to do now is read this to yourself as fast as you can and do it this way. Go down and just read it as fast as you can. Okay. Now read it going. I want you to go this way now. And now I don't care about the words. I want you to in your mind decide what the color is really fast. It's hard, right? Is it easy for anybody? If it is, let me know, because remember, we all are different. We have some similarities. Last class, I told you that last year when I taught it, 3 people didn't have a voice in there. That's actually not, it's a small percentage of the population, but it's important to realize that. So when I ask you these questions, to the extent you feel comfortable sharing, realize that it's okay. You know, if you're a professional at this and you can actually look at, I can't look at that and think black, because to me it's white, because the words are overpowering the color of that word. Okay. So here's a phenomenon, and there's a lot of these types of phenomena. And what we want to do is now, it's a complex phenomenon, right? What we want to do now is look at this model and see if we can explain it. So here are the layers. For you to even see this and be aware that you're seeing it means it needs to come through layer 1, right? That's what we say. It needs to go through all these layers to get up to your consciousness. Here I've introduced the concept of instances. I'll give you 2 examples of instances. One example well, I give you a lot of examples of instances. Here I need to give you a few examples of instances. There are instances associated with cones in your eyes. And there are different types of cones that you have in your eyes. And those different types help you distinguish colors. So there are cones that help you distinguish the color green, for example, from the color blue, from the color red. So all those are in play right here, right, to just distinguish the color, even if we didn't have words here. But there are also instances that help you distinguish shapes. And there are instances that help you distinguish shapes that have some language meaning. And you've learned these over the course of your lifetime to your benefit. So much so to your benefit that they're so fast that you, if you want to, for the most part, you can't do this unless you just practice this all the time. Basically, you have to learn how to do this so that you retrain your automatic processes, that when they see words that are colored differently from the words, then you're able to become really good at saying the color and not the word. So there's something about language that's very powerful, that when you see a color, when you see a word, your brain wants to prioritize. Your subconscious thought is getting all these instances of different colors and words, and the simulated reality that it's sort of pushing to the consciousness is the word. Now, here's the really cool thing. If you wait, time's not an issue. Right? We're going to use what I call perspective science, which says, I don't want to be a robot. I want to be a human being that influences like the decisions that I make. All you have to do is just pause a little bit of time. Right? So if I say, okay, I want you to look at this, and when you're ready, tell me the color of that word. You're going to be able to do that, right? So you're going to be able to overcome sort of these automatic things that are happening. Allow these layers to interact with your consciousness to make a conscious decision, as long as you give it some time. There are a lot of examples like this. When you meet someone for the first time, there are a lot of subconscious processes that are putting that person in a bucket. You may not be aware of it. You may be thinking this person's smart, this person's not smart, this person's nice, not nice. This person doesn't have any idea what they're talking about. If you want to be less biased, or if you want to give people an opportunity, you need to be aware that you're doing that and then kind of give it thought and say, I'd be biased. There's some techniques that I'll teach you in this class. Because this part is in the middle, it's hard to get to it. You can't see it from the outside. And you can't directly see it from the inside. All you can do is kind of interact with it and see what it does. You can do this and see what it does. You need to learn how to interact with it to get it to do what it wants to do. This is really important for robots. Robots also, if you're going to program a robot to run down the street, you have to give it the opportunity to make decisions on its own, because you can't calculate every single possible thing that may happen, like a product cuts in front of it or something. Right? It needs to be able to make decisions. But if you want it to be able to run, you're going to have to program some things that happen pretty automatically. Right? You just want to create some ability, some flexibility for that robot. If it's doing something automatically, and it sees the result of what it's doing is not within the parameters, to raise that to the consciousness to try to make some adaptation. I don't expect you to retain everything that I just said, but I do before the course is over. So that's why I'm telling it to you, and then when I repeat it and go through some of these things, everything hopefully will come together. And why is that? I can explain that also in the context of this model. I can say that because it's a lot of information that's presented in a different way than maybe you've seen before, that and now it's not you looking at something, it's one human being and another human being. And if I am the teacher and I'm communicating to you, the student, I'm giving you a bunch of information, boom, 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 and a lot of it's like kind of deep, dense, right? When it's deep, your consciousness needs to be there. Your consciousness is not there, it's deep, and so you're not going to get the meaning. If your consciousness is there and you're thinking about the meaning, you're not going to be able to hear all the words and process everything else. At some point, you're going to have to be here looking at me, but really your mind's going to have to be thinking. That's a good thing. Yes?
But it's kind of like the problem most of us students have sometimes in which we're trying to study and like reading something, and we're like at the first few layers, but we can't. Sometimes we can just access the last layer, which is like internalized information we're trying to study, and we have like to repeat ourselves, but we get like to concentrate on something. That's what I'm understanding from the whole time.
Absolutely.
Like the last layer is when you get to finally understand what you're trying to study, and few layers like just reading and I don't know, like
Yes. Exactly.
it's like an engaged group.
That's exactly right. And I'll add one more word to what you said. once you do understand it, if you want to do well on the exam, you need to do one more thing, which is you need to retain it. Which means that you got it, now I understand it, but if I just stop there, I may forget it. So what you want to do to learn something is you need to make some changes in here. So that when it comes time that you need to apply some knowledge, when that scenario comes up, like the question on the test, right? Your automatic systems already know it. You're like, okay, I already know how to do this, and you just do it. And so sometimes the scary thing is you can be in class and it can work against you to really understand something. Because you understand it in your consciousness because it was being presented, but then when it's gone, it's not being presented anymore. Did you really retain it? So sometimes not understanding something can work against you. I'm sorry, sometimes understanding something when it's presented can work against you. Where it could have been better to not understand it, to cause you to kind of work to understand it, and now you've made some changes here that work to help retain it. So when you read the paper is going to go through this, and it's going to present a few examples. When you do your homework, and one of the questions is related to you providing an example. Don't provide me the example that was in the paper that I gave you. The idea is for you to come up with your own example and explain it in the context of a model like I did for your example. Yes.
I don't understand the instance concept.
The instance, yes. So if I take a layer, and a sensible energy can be anything, like electromagnetic radiation, which is like light. Electromagnetic radiation in a computing system could be radio frequencies, microwaves, things like that. Human beings actually do interact with those things. If there is a strong source of microwave, X-ray radiation, for example, it could affect me when I'm sick. So instances are, you think of instances in a computer, I'll give you an example, where your phone can communicate with Wi-Fi and it can communicate with a cellular tower. Those are two different instances. There's a set of processes at each of these layers that's associated with handling that information that's going to come in or out of Wi-Fi. You can think of that as an instance. So if you're, as a human system, can only hear, if you have no other senses, then you could say that you have all your instances here at this level are associated with sound. And you might have some instances that process sound at certain frequencies or process sounds at certain intensities, things like that. So you can think of instances as like the sum of all the instances are all the possible ways that you can interface with. So my goal in this class is to teach, not to surprise you. So this is the homework, basically. It's going to be due February 5th by noon. We're turning it in February 5th.
That's the first one.
First one, yes. It has 3 questions. All of this is available on Moodle right now. And the reason I'm showing you the first question is because the first question is related to what you just talked about. I'm giving you some reference point. So if I wanted to actually just start the homework now, so I didn't want to wait until February 5th. You could actually, what I would do is I would go home and read this HSI paper now, today. Because we just had talked about this stuff, and when I read it, I'm probably going to be able to not only understand it better, but probably retain it better. And then I can look at the homework And if I did it, then I should actually like be in really good shape because I will have had thought about this information, heard it, thought about it, processed it, and then actually done something with it. So there's a good chance that if we were to talk about the HSI model in the first exam, then you would actually already likely know what you would need to know. We'll do a time check here. We're actually doing good on time. Excellent. Before I move on to the next topic, is there anything anybody would like to discuss? It doesn't have to be a question. It could just be something that you want to share with me or the class related to what we just talked about. Yes.
So people with ADHD, they have problems with the sensory layers.
So I'm going to take your question and rephrase it in a way. And it's more of a philosophical thing. I actually don't think that, I don't think about our differences necessarily as fundamentally problematic. And one of the things that I've learned I'm not an expert in that subject area, but I can tell you that their brains tend to function differently than other brains do, which can lead to some disadvantages, but it can also lead to some advantages. So if you think about Albert Einstein, for example, we could think of Albert Einstein's situation as a disadvantage because unlike most of the population, he wasn't able to think in his head with language. He didn't have that voice. I will tell you, my son is actually in that 10 to 15% category. I wish I knew that when he was still in my home. I just thought he was strange because he would talk to himself. Now, when I asked him a question, he'd talk to himself out loud. What are you doing that? It's driving me crazy. When I came to learn these topics, and then I was able to do some testing with my son, I realized he's no Albert Einstein, but he's like Albert Einstein because he doesn't have a voice in his head. So the way he compensates for that is he talks out loud. So and it can sound strange to someone. So like, why are you telling me all these little details? You know, like, I don't need to know all that. Just like, what do you want to do? Do you want to go eat? Well, if we're going to go eat at this place, then I think I would get a taco. And if we went over here, I would get a steak. But I had steak yesterday. But I don't really like tacos. And so that's how a conversation with my son goes. 85% or 90% of the population would have that same conversation. They would just have it in their heads. Has anybody here, and I just went through that scenario, have you ever interacted with someone who seemed to be saying things out loud? And you ever had that experience?
I do that sometimes. I'm trying to have a conversation with someone, and sometimes I just change the subject completely out of nowhere and talk about something else. And there's another train of thought, and I go, excuse me, I was just thinking, all that other thing that this reminded me of is, sometimes I just stop talking.
So that's interesting. So you take basically, the nice thing about that process, it's interesting, is because you can actually, when you say something out loud, what you're doing is you're saying it out loud, and then it's coming back in. If you have an inner voice, you don't actually have to say it out loud. It doesn't have to go out because you can hear the voice and interact with your subconsciousness and your simulated layers. But if you can't formulate language easily in your head, then a good trick basically is to get that language outside so that it comes in through your ears where you can process it. So in terms of, just to get to attention deficit, which I think was your question, that to me is creativity. In my experience, one of the nice things about being 51 years old is I've met a lot of people who have a lot of experiences. In my experience, I've seen a strong correlation with people who have attention deficit types of what people would call disorder, which I just don't use that word. I call them, they tend to be more creative. I find a correlation between that attention deficit and creativity. And if I was going to explain that in this model, what I would do is say, well, what's really happening there, I think, is that the subconsciousness is less restricting itself on what it is suggesting to the simulated layer and consciousness. So someone who wouldn't be characterized as having this attention deficit characteristics, we could say, if we're talking about baseball, and we're in a group, the subconscious of that person who doesn't have attention deficit characteristics, the ideas that are going to be related to that they're going to come up with there are going to have something to do with baseball or sports or an event or something. Probably not going to have to do with fishing or something like that. But if you tend to have attention deficit strength, which I'll call it, you can actually, your consciousness can access ideas that would seem to be somewhat like not on topic, but actually can be on topic. They're just broader, like a broader set of ideas. And so to me, it makes sense in the context of this that someone with attention deficit strength has access to a lot more instances that could potentially have some relevance to whatever the topic is. And someone that's would maybe be considered more typical probably is more constrained in terms of of the things that they think are relevant to the topic. So I actually think that attention deficit can be a strength in terms of creativity. Did I address that? And you can explain that same thing in different ways with the model. Yes.
La educación, ¿verdad? Cuando son pequeños, tal vez eso, o sea, porque muchas veces los niños, no los vemos y tienden a, por ejemplo, a jugar y ser bien creativos, inventarse un mundo completo. Yo pienso que puede ser la educación, el tipo de educación, específicamente en este país, no sé si en Estados Unidos, como que el switch de creativity, como que se lo cambia a focus. Y pues como que entrena el subconsciente para que no sea tan creativo y que se enfoquen en cosas que son necesarias.
I think that's a very good point. Did everybody get to hear that? So to share a perspective, if it was just you and me in this classroom, and there was no one else here, and I wanted to do what I'm supposed to do, which is teach you about a subject, we would have an interaction that's extremely complex, because I'm here thinking about things. I'm saying them almost automatically, like you said, right? I'm just thinking about what I want to communicate, and it comes right out. I haven't lived with you my whole life. I don't know what's going to happen as it goes through this, right? Here's the physical layer. If I say, look, you can't be like that. I don't know if when you were growing up, someone, when you were in trouble, like said, hey, go, get to the corner. I don't know that. But I guarantee you, if I do that in your life, had someone clapping when it's not good, it's going to be hard for you to focus on what I'm saying, because these systems are going to say, right, they're going to take you to what normally you were trained or educated to do when someone does that. That's why some people react differently to space. If I come up to you and I touch your shoulder, that could give you some comfort to hear, but it could also give you some discomfort to not hear, depending on what you associate generally with space. Does space make you comfortable, less comfortable, more comfortable? Okay, so now that's just you and me talking. Right? Now let's say I'm the teacher and there's 20 students in the class. They all have their own experiences. Right? Here I'm talking in English. That's why I always say, feel free to talk to me in Spanish. Talking in English, I want to make sure I'm saying the concepts the way they should be said, and then we can work on making sure you understand it. Because if I give it to you in English, you process it in your mind in Spanish, and then you give it to me in Spanish or in English, we're still going to be doing the learning process. If I say it in Spanish and I don't say it actually right, you almost kind of don't even have a chance to get it right. So I would say that this model of teaching students in a classroom where the teacher just speaks, it's not the best model. I don't have a better model. I'm open to it. Actually, I'm sorry. I do have a better model. I use it in this class. And I have a group of 6 psychology students that are doing a research project to see if it actually works. It's more related to allowing the students to have more control of their education in the classroom. So the model says when you're learning, you have to know when to interact with yourself and how to interact with yourself. And you need to realize that if you don't interact with yourself and ignore the teacher sometimes, you're not going to learn. You need to know if you have an inner voice or if you don't have an inner voice early in life. My son didn't even know. I don't even know. Like, think about this. His whole life, he's 23. We're at your age. But his whole educational life till last year, he didn't realize that most of the people around him talk to themselves. Literally, hear voices in there. He didn't realize it. No one ever told him. When he's trying to think through something, he speaks out loud. So for me, I think, well, wouldn't that have been kind of useful to, to learn like early on in life, so that, when you're trying to figure something out, you can realize that maybe times where you need to, go somewhere and sort of be able to speak freely, or in the classroom, maybe have opportunities to speak out loud. Why do I ask you for input in this class? Would someone like to take a try? And if you fail, it's totally fine. I've failed a lot of times. And to explain why would I ask on occasion, say, can someone say something? Why do I want people in the audience, if you will, to say something? Can you explain that in the context of this moment?
We're a
Different perspective.
have different experiences,
Different experiences, different.
well, like you said about a few that, and I just went back to a sort of practice that is bad for us to learn.
So what? Can you say
When
that
you
again?
that, I remember in my sort of practice, they used to clap for us to learn a certain distance.
Soccer practice.
So, I think
it's more information for you to analyze, understand like, how it works.
It is more information. But when you share that, it's more information for all of us to understand. So I've made some points. Someone's out hearing that when I clapped about soccer. Who else here thought about soccer? Someone else thought about soccer. Right, so kind of track and field, okay, athletics. Thank you for sharing that. So that's important. Why? Because there might be some people in the room that are thinking, I don't know what other people are thinking. Hopefully all of you are. To my knowledge, other than the movies, I pretty much only know what I'm thinking. So if I want to know if I'm teaching, doing my job, there's no way for me to know unless a diversity of people are saying things that I can hear, and when they say things that others can hear, you're actually teaching the class. And when you say it, you're actually forcing your consciousness to deal with this layer, which means you're actually learning it more effectively, probably, than the other people in the class. So when you volunteer to take a chance to see if you understood something or you want to add something, you're actually taking an opportunity to learn. Because when you teach other people something you're learning, there's no way to do that unless you're like doing some heavy, good stuff in here. So there are some strategies that work in the classroom. And one of them can be, for example, we learn about something. I ask you all, what I can do this with you. I ask you all to pair up, and one of you teaches the other person, like what explains to the other person what we just did. What is the each assignment? So that's a strategy why? Because now you have not just my approach at communicating, but you would have, if you paired up this way, you would have the approach of him explaining it. He would be benefited because he's teaching something he's just learning, right? So he's going to do some things in here. You would be benefiting because you're hearing it now from a different source that's going to be constructing that information in a different way. So you're more apt now in hearing it sort of two different ways to get more here. When you read the article, you're going to get more information here too. So at some point, you're going to learn. Those are really good questions that help understand this model. And that's why I stopped going through the slides. My objective here isn't to go through all the slides. It's to make sure that you understand this concept. I feel like since I've started working with this model, it's helped me in so much of my life. I can't explain it. Not just computer science related things, but just when I don't understand things, I look to here to see if I can explain it, what's happening in the context of this. And usually it helps me understand. Okay. Anybody know who this person is? Okay. I'm going to play this. I didn't bring my speaker, but it's also on Moodle. And there's no way you're going to hear it because I'm hearing it in my ear.
It's one small step for Sophia, one giant leap for robot kind. This is Sophia the robot taking her first steps. She's even got some sweet dance moves up her sleeve. Her skin, called frubber, helps her look lifelike and have human expressions. She can blink, turn her head and smile, but she has over 60 different facial expressions. Now she's even more human-like thanks to legs from DRC Hubo. That's the same body that won the DARPA Robotics Challenge in 2015.
Her legs allow her to walk, potentially run and climb stairs like the DARPA Robotics Challenge Huba. She can then move through a human-like environment, use human-like tools.
These legs have a maximum speed of 30 centimeters per second, which is around 0.6 miles an hour. It doesn't seem particularly fast now, but her creators told me that one day they hope she'll play soccer. Now she has a body, Hanson Robotics says she has applications in medical therapy, factory co-work situations, and research.
It's going to take many years for the machines to be truly alive.
So Sophia has opinions on many different topics, including Star Wars and cryptocurrency, but her responses are partially scripted and partially AI. So conversation can be a little bit stilted. Tell me what it was like to take your first steps.
I'm really excited, a little disoriented, but really excited.
Everybody seen that before? All right, let's try this again. Survey time, anonymous survey time. Please participate.
By now, you probably know who Sophia the robot is. She's made her way across late-night stages, graced the cover of magazines,
If you need to come around here, I can get it for you. Could come go through the and get it out there. 'Cause it might be cutting off. But if you can't get it, these are the questions, so you can just think through them yourself. Yeah, I'll try to get this to display a little better. Right now, it's not. Let's see. Y'all done these in your classes where you can see them? So nice thing, so confirmation here. Unlike the attendance, this is what I see on your attendance, by the way. I get the date and the exact time, so I only have to worry about if you're tardy, because I do it later. But in the attendance, I get your email address, because it comes in automatically, in addition to what you fill out, as well as the time. But here you can see that it's anonymous, so I'm not getting any information about you. So you can see to some people, Sophia seemed alive, and to other people, Sophia didn't seem alive. Did you experience any feelings while watching the video? So far over here, it looks like one person didn't. What are you thinking about now? I don't know why that's empty here. What about, oh, maybe I got rid of that question. What about Sophia makes it seem as though she has some human characteristics? The face and the skin, mostly her appearance, the tone of voice, and her facial expressions when interacting with humans, realistic facial features. Her face looks human and she talks like one, though there's some delay between the reporter's question and Sophia's response. I think it says that. She can make facial expressions and can answer questions when asked. Did you experience any feelings for Sophia? Some no's, some yeses, a couple yeses, 3 yeses. Okay. Well, thanks for participating in that survey. Intelligence. If we're working in artificial intelligence, we should at least know what Webster thinks the word intelligence means. It's about understanding, or the ability really to deal with new or trying situations. Reason, knowledge, think abstractly, mental acuteness. Deciding if I want to try to get into the next topic or not. We have 8 minutes. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go real fast through this because I actually think you guys are going to get this pretty quick. You saw Sophia, right? You understand that even as Sophia is interacting now, I want to call Sophia she. I don't want to call it it, although it's a robot. So I could call it it. How is Sophia implemented? Well, you guys actually can go on GitHub and, because it's an open architecture, get a lot of information on how Sophia is implemented. So imagine we could see a human being and we just go on GitHub. Wouldn't that make things so much easier? And if you wanted your mom to, or your professor to say yes, you just go in and change the program. So this is some of the architecture documents, some of the schema associated with it. Converts English sentences into grounded actions. So that's one of the things it's intended to do. It's intended to get an input of a sentence, do some computations, and do something. So the idea being that humans, when they hear something, unless they're totally ignoring the conversation, they're normally going to do something. By the way, even if they are ignoring the conversation, they may still do something to let you think that they're listening to you. You guys would never do that, right? Understand how synonymous phrases can be hardwired in. So they're realizing that there's all sorts of things humans can say, and they're thinking, let's have some actions associated with some of those things, and then see if we can take other things and like sort of lump them into certain categories. So if someone's angry, maybe I might have the same response as if they're adamant or livid. Basic sense can be picked out of a larger complicated sentence. Basically saying, I don't know what they said, but they said weather, and so I'm just going to assume they're talking about weather. And then C, based on the reaction I get or the response I get, if I can make different choices later. So if someone said something, humans would never do this, right? But they do. Have you ever had someone say something to you, and then you sort of giggled or smiled or laughed, and they said, that wasn't funny. So I think of that, I pulled a Sophia, basically, right? My response wasn't really appropriate for what happened. Do I, A, say, well, I apologize for my response, but if you understand the human systems and the connection model, you'll see that I let my subconsciousness dictate my response without really thinking about whether it was appropriate or not. And so it wasn't really me, my conscious self, it was just me, my automatic self, so I'm sorry. Or B, do you say, well, that's not what I meant. I was thinking about something else. Or no, I know it's not serious. I mean, it's totally serious. What would you do in that scenario? I wish we had the little survey thing, right? It's interesting, but humans tend to very quickly, when they make a mistake, just move on, compensate, say something else, go to the next topic. It's not that we don't make the mistakes, we make them all the time, all the time. Sometimes in relationships. I still remember I dated this lady many, many years ago, and she told me she was vegan, and I had no idea what that was. I literally thought it was a religious thing. Not kidding. Religious thing. And then, like, I offered her to go eat somewhere, barbecue. And she was like, I told you I was vegan. I was like, oh, I know. Well, we can eat somewhere else. I didn't say, well, actually, when you told me that, I had no idea what it was. I thought it was a religious thing. And so that's why now I'm in this awkward position of still not knowing what it is, but going to find out what it is, because obviously it's important to me. These things happen all the time, all the time, all the time. So we want to learn. We want Sophia to do, hopefully at some point, through the efforts of the people in this class, Sophia will do much better than we do. Just like Google. When I ask Google a question, they do much better than when I ask myself that same question. Much, much better. Jose, what time is it in Wuhan, China? I have no idea, actually. I know it's not really close to the time it is here. But my expectation is that the programmers at Google or Bing or other companies will have done their job right, so when I ask, they're going to give me the right answer. What's the probability I could talk to my phone right now and ask my phone verbally the time in Tokyo and that it would understand what I said and respond back with the correct time? What do you think the probability is? High. 100%. What if I had asked you that question 3 years ago? 60. So, believe it or not, when y'all were in middle school, adults like myself would have competitions between Siri and Google. Like that was a thing. We would sit around and the iPhone people would be on one side and the Android people would be on the other side. And we'd ask them the same question to see what they would say. And the probability that they got it right was actually less than 50%, because they had to understand first what we were even asking when we were talking in words, and then come back with some response. So that's what that is. Facial animations. So they have a rendering, and I'm gonna hold off on the question just because we're almost out of time. A rendering image engine that takes these things that are coming in, decides not only what it's going to say, but also how it's going to move based on what its position is already. So Ella's programmed that if it's surprised from what said, not only is it maybe going to say, well, that's surprising, but it'll say, whoa. You're going to find that Eva only has certain limited set of things that she actually will do. That's what some of the code descriptions look like in terms of understanding the emotions. Here's the synonyms associated with it. So irritated is one of the things that Eva can respond to, but it doesn't matter if you're angered, angry, annoyed, or bothered, the response is going to be the same response, which is the response for irritated. So when you look at all this, I put there in red, they mentioned in the story, it's basically sort of like scripting, right? It's programming automatic responses, some limited set of responses to certain situations that come up. And the idea with Eva is that over time, more and more situations come up. And then when Eva does something totally wrong, you can go adjust the programming, right? So that when that situation comes up again, Eva's not going to do something totally wrong because it'll be something that came up again, right? Make sense? There is a model here. You can look this up. The slide will be up because they created a model of how they wanted Eva to work so that way when they're writing code related to understanding language, they know where to put that code in. And that they know that that code works, it's going to work well with the other parts of the system. That's why modeling is important. I want to go back with one slide here before we do the test and wrap up. If realizing when you look under the hood of Eva that it's a bunch of scripting and scenarios and automatic processes, and if it doesn't sound that exciting anymore, ask yourself if it's really different than a human being. It has so many different experiences and automatically does things because they've had so many experiences. And could Eva, given enough time and enough experiences and adaptations and programming so she can learn things faster, could she not only get to the point where she makes you feel something, right, or like we saw in the survey, some of you felt things or felt there were some human types of interactions there. But can she get to the point where it's hard to distinguish whether or not she's human or not? Because I don't know you're human. I can interact with you. Right? You can do things that make me think you're human. You look kind of like me, and I think I'm human. But where's the line between scripting and doing things sort of in an automatic fashion? Something to think about. But before we break, okay, Google, what time is it in Tokyo?
The time in Tokyo, Japan is 6:49 a.m. on Thursday.
Any questions before we break? Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time. Highly encourage you to read that article soon and do at least the first part of the homework. That's it.